had this moment in the helicopter where I knew I had to let her go, where I just knew it was her time and that this was a soul contract. Like I just somehow knew, and it was so hard, but also I just knew that it was the right thing to do. So I started just asking her questions like, where are you? What's going on? Like, why did you leave? What happened when you left? Like, did anyone greet you? Do you have a message for me?
Hello, friends. Welcome back, and thank you for joining me today. I would like to offer a trigger warning before we get into today's show for loss of a child, as that is going to be a main topic of our conversation today. Thank you for watching. Let's get into the interview. Hello, thank you for joining me today. I am here today with Nichole Clark. Thank you for joining me today, Nicole.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Likewise. So I guess let's start at the beginning, and maybe you could share with us your background in Mormonism. Were you raised in Mormonism, or how did you get into that, and what was that experience like?
I was born and raised Mormon, probably third or fourth generation. Had been running our family for forever, and I loved it. I loved Mormonism. I loved the people; they're top notch, and I lived it, breathed it, did everything according to the books. I was a straight arrow, or what they would call you, a Molly Mormon. Never questioned it, and never really sought answers outside of it. And that was for the first 38 years of my life. I'm now 44, so it's been a little bit since I left, and there's still parts of it that I really miss. But being Mormon was beautiful. I'm really grateful for that experience, and it just doesn't align with my soul anymore. Like I learned things. I actually had to have a horrible tragedy happen. You know, a lot of us really need something bad to happen in order to wake us up. And my dad passed away suddenly and unexpectedly in 2017, which was kind of my catalyst to waking up to something different. And I probably wouldn't have had he not died. And that evening, my husband was trying to calm me down. I'd been crying all day and not knowing how to console myself. And he was like, let's just watch a movie and try to get your mind off of it for a little bit. And guess what movie he found? He found The Secret by Rhonda Byrne.
No way.
Up until that point, I had never in my life heard of the law of attraction, never heard of our personal power to create our own worlds, none of that. Like it was all brand new. And I swear on my life that my dad orchestrated that. Like he led my husband to that because it led me down a rabbit hole that I'm still going down every day, you know, trying to figure out just the secrets of life. And just it was really exciting to my soul. It brought me out of my grief instantly and made me realize that there's a lot more to this world that maybe I haven't been exposed to or learned about yet. And obviously I was still grieving for a while after that, and still am today. And I'm really grateful that it led me to this process, because eventually it led me to just finding my own personal power instead of needing a prophet or a guru or a savior even to come and save me. And it enabled me to really do some research and personal reflection and say, you know what? We never know when it's our time. And I don't want to die with any regrets. So from there on, I made my, I guess, mantra for life to make regret my biggest fear. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since.
Wow. Okay. So when you discovered this movie, The Secret, and this whole other world opened up to you, was it like a quick process of leaving Mormonism and moving on, or was it like a slow process where you had to go back and rethink your previous beliefs?
Oh my goodness. It was a very slow, arduous process. I was very resistant to any change, like most humans, right? We're very comfortable in our comfort zone. And I loved my church and I loved my family, and my family was all in the church, right? It was my whole world. And so to question it and to really find beliefs that were different, that actually lit me up more, was terrifying. And you're taught, if you leave the church, you're going to be in Satan's power, and you're taught that there's lots of consequences to that, and that you won't be with your family for all eternity. And that's terrifying. Nobody wants that unless they don't like their family, but I love my family. Right? But it was very terrifying, and I questioned it for a few years, to the point where I actually thought that I could live in both worlds. I thought I could be like super spiritual and mystical and whatever, and still be Mormon. Because, spirit is with any religion. I believe that people can receive revelation because we're all spiritual beings. And it came to the point where I had been going every Sunday for a year, at least a year. And every Sunday I'd be like, why am I still going? Like, this doesn't light me up anymore. It actually makes me feel really bad. And I couldn't speak my truth. It was really terrifying. And my brother had left the church a few years before me. And because of his leaving, my mom would call me every Friday and talk for at least an hour about how worried she was about my brother. And over and over. And it was just like, but and I couldn't tell her. I just couldn't do it to her, already like physically ill from it almost. And so I pushed it off and I pushed it off, and it was just really, really difficult. And then it got to the point where my husband and I went to a Dr. Joe Dispenza week-long
You did?
meditation retreat. Oh my goodness. Yes.
Oh, that's like my dream to go to one of those.
Yes, it was amazing. I went when I was pregnant with my 6th child, and this was probably a year after my dad had died, actually about right after a year. And we went for a week, and it was really cool because they break you up into small groups. And at the end of the day, when you've learned all the things and done all the meditations, you talk with your small group, which was still like 50 people. So not super small, but small enough that you got to know the same people, see the same people out of thousands, And every day we'd talk at the end of the day and just share lessons learned or whatever. And in that group of 50 people, there were at least 20 women, and I kid you not with this, that had throat problems. And I had no idea anything about chakras at that time or anything, but a lot of them had thyroid issues, permanent sore throats, like all these weird issues. And I had a breathing problem at that time. I was pregnant with my daughter, and we thought that I had asthma, but I got tested, but they couldn't really tell anything because I'm pregnant. So they gave me an inhaler, and it did absolutely nothing. And this whole time I'm like at the Dr. Joe thing, like, that's an interesting observation, but I have no idea what that means. Fast forward a year later, when my daughter is now 5 or 6 months old, I'm trying to carry her up and my breathing problem was still there, and it was getting worse instead of better. Like, we thought it'd be alleviated when she was out, but no, it kept getting worse, to the point where I'm walking up the stairs trying to bring her up to her crib, and it's 5 or 6 months. She's 5 or 6 months old, and I could not breathe. I had to stop at every step and wait several seconds just to get enough air to do another step. And I was like, something is drastically wrong with me right now, and I need to figure out what. So for the first time, it popped in my head, no coincidence, that I needed to call an ENT instead of the breathing people, whatever their doctors are called, and got an appointment for the next day. And he tried to look through my note, like they put this little camera up your nose and then down your throat, and he couldn't even get it very far. He was like, there's some weird obstruction here, and I don't know what's wrong, so we need to get you an emergency CAT scan, like right now. You're not leaving the hospital today. And I was like, what?
Wow.
So got a CAT scan. He was like, oh yeah, you actually need to go to Columbus, which is 2 hours away, to a specialty. Like, I have no idea what's wrong with you. The only time I've ever seen anything like this in somebody's throat is a 12-year-old boy that had like a pole hit him in a car accident or something. And I was like, I have no idea. So the next morning, we had scheduled to drive up to Columbus and figure out what's going on. But before that, I did an early morning meditation. I love meditation. And in that meditation, I was getting a very clear picture of what was wrong and why it was wrong. And I was brought back to a time when I was 12 years old, and I was trying to speak my truth with my mom and tell her something that I believed, and I felt like a caged animal. And I knew that I couldn't speak my truth because it wasn't safe. And I'd held on to that for so long. And then Now with the whole Mormonism in question, I still wasn't speaking my truth. And then I learned that the throat chakra is what represents one being able to speak their truth. So my throat chakra, my soul had literally closed it to the point where that day when I went to the specialist, he did a picture and it was about the size of one of those little like black coffee straws, like
Oh, wow.
right here above my epiglottis. And it was not normal. He said it's called idiopathic subglottic stenosis, which means they don't know what causes it, but it's a narrowing of the airway right here. And only 1 in 500,000 people usually get it. And it's usually women who have been pregnant. So I
Wow.
fit all the like norm, but they didn't know why.
Wow.
But I knew why. And had to end up getting throat surgery, and that was about 4 years ago now. And usually with people who have this, and I'm assuming this is because I have the, I guess, metaphysical knowledge behind it, but a lot of people, the majority of them, have to go back and get surgery over and over to be able to keep the airway opened up, because it's scar tissue that builds up over time. But I haven't had to go back. I've been very, very blessed. And I think that's because that was the catalyst for me to speak my truth and leave. I knew that my soul, my body has always spoken to me before my conscious awareness gets it. Like my body is very like, I don't know what the word be, intuitive, and I feel pain really easily. And I think it's a message that my body that I send to myself on a soul level to wake me up or help me learn a lesson. And so at that moment I learned that, oh my goodness, my soul is like literally like choking me to death to get me to wake up and speak my truth, which was that I needed to leave the church and start speaking differently than what I'd ever taught was the only truth I knew. And so I did, and it was terrifying, and it's been a wonderful thing.
Oh, wow. So how did that go over when you did that? If that's not too personal of a question.
Well, it depends on who you talk to. um, Luckily, my husband and I were both on a very similar journey. So he had actually started deconstructing before I did.
Okay.
I was really terrified to tell my children because we'd been taking them their whole life. You know, my oldest, I think at the time, was 15 or 16. And my two oldest, like I said, I'm not going to church this Sunday and I probably won't ever go back. And then I told them why, and they were like, I'm like,
Oh, that's so funny.
like almost embarrassed, because the Mormon mom in me was like, oh my goodness, I did a terrible job of indoctrinating my children. Like they want to leave. Only one of my then five children wanted to go back. Like, and she went back with my husband was in the bishopric at the time, which is one of the leaders of the congregation. And I think he went for 2 more weeks without me and the other kids, and he brought the one daughter, and then they both said, no, we're going to do this together as a family. So but then if you go to the greater family, it was not well received, as you can imagine. And it's been a very difficult journey. And my whole life, because my entire family and tribe and everything was always wrapped around religion and that specific faith, it's been very lonely. It's been a very difficult and arduous journey. And we'll talk about my book in a little bit, but that was the hardest part. That's been the hardest part of it, is speaking out, not even against the church, but differently than what they.
Man, that's so common. And for people who leave, that the hardest part is having to say something different than what the rest of their community believes and having that not be accepted. And it's such a lonely journey. I know for me, it was just devastating. I mean, in the moment, I thought I was handling it well, but then as time went on and things don't get better, it can be so hard.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And we live in the heart of the Bible Belt. We moved here.
Oh, yeah.
It was the perfect place to raise our kids because they all have similar values and beliefs. And now, now that we don't even identify as Christian, it's like, why are we still here?
Yeah.
We have, we have a life built here, and yeah, it's been very lonely, and that's been very difficult. And
Mm.
I feel like everyone has to kind of go through their own different dark night of the soul or whatever you want to call it in order to come out on the other side and know that it's okay.
Mm. Well, thank you for sharing about that and being honest about how difficult it has been. Because, like I said, so many people are going through this, and their only means of connecting with anybody is on the internet and
Mhm.
to find out that other people are in it with them. But one thing that I wanted to ask you specifically, because you went through this process having raised your kids in the church, and I wanted to ask you, how was that journey as a parent? Because I've gone through this myself with raising my kids in the church for the first part of their lives and then leaving. And my biggest concern was that I would cause that drama for them, that I would pass on to them all the things I was going through. And I did my best to prevent that from happening. But unfortunately, because there were so many people in our life who didn't agree with what we were doing, it was impossible for me to keep them out of the drama because people would go to them when my husband and I were not around and talk to them and pressure them to come back to the church, to where now one of my children is very anti-church, very anti-religion. And so parenting through this has been such a challenge. And I like to hear what your journey with that has been.
Yeah. Like I said before, like the two oldest were super excited. And then they found like when they went to school, like first of all, Mormons aren't even considered Christians by many Christians.
Yeah.
And they're already outcasts. They're like outcasts of the outcasts, right? of the Christian religion. And so they were already outcasts for that. But then they thought, oh, well, now that I'll be free from that judgment, they just had to keep their mouths quiet. They learned really quickly, especially in the heart of the Bible Belt here. Uh, as parents, it's been very difficult because for us, it was leaving a very structured environment, knowing exactly what to teach them, when to teach them, what rules to give them, how to raise them in such a way that they would be safe and protected and all those things. And now it's just like an open can of worms. Like, well, how do we handle this? What do we do
Right.
now? And that's been probably the most difficult part for me and my husband, is just figuring out, like, letting go of the rule book and allowing our children to become who they want to become and to believe what they want to believe without judging it as wrong or bad, or
Mhm.
without telling them you're not allowed to believe that, because we are both raised with, this is the only right way, the only one. You'll have lots of different options, but this is the one you have to follow. And now we have this just like wide open like arena of like, well, kids, you can choose whatever path you want, and
Right.
we will support you with that. And sometimes that's a lot easier said than done, right? And we do have a child, at least one of them, that's very anti-religion
Mhm.
because her belief system is now, I don't even know what most of my kids believe. They don't want to talk about stuff like that. And but she honestly goes there and sees all the hypocrisy
Yeah.
between the Christian kids who are literally talking about Jesus and then talking about all their neighbors, about how ugly they are, how fat they are, how they don't have good clothes, or how they ate that for lunch, or and she just sees that and comes home and complains all the time about how she hates Christians. And I'm like, no, that's not the message we're giving you.
Right.
But that's what she has internalized, unfortunately, because she's seen the backlash. And unfortunately, with our religion, it's not quite as bad as like the Amish being outcast or whatever, or the J Dubs, but there's a silent, like, excommunication process. Like
Yes.
they kind of just like
Yeah.
shun you silently. They'll smile at your face and talk to you, but none of them are brave enough or curious enough to ask you the truth or ask you why they left. They don't want to know because it's terrifying to them, and they've been taught that we could lead them astray.
Mhm.
So, we're now a danger zone to them. So they don't contact us or our kids. And that's very difficult because it's like your whole bubble just popped and now just disappeared. And we've had like one or two families reach out from our congregation where we did all the things for so many years.
Mm.
And then it's just like, we just don't exist anymore. So that's been interesting for our kids and for us. But, it is
Oh.
what it is.
Well, I appreciate hearing about your journey and your experience with your kids and how how open-minded you are with them to let them follow their own path.
easier said than done, but I think
Yeah,
it's important to not force anything. I think a lot of kids, especially in the generations, millennials and Gen X that are coming up, they're not falling for the crap that we fell for so long.
exactly.
And they're like, they just hold resentment. And I see a lot of people of my generation, moms that are coming on, they're like, I don't understand why my kids don't want any contact. I don't understand why my kids don't want to have any relationship with anymore. And I'm like, I do. Like, I totally
Mm,
understand it, because I had to go no contact with my mom for a while after I left, because it felt like just constant shaming. And that wasn't her goal. That wasn't her intention or what she thought she was doing. She thought she was trying to lovingly bring me back, but that to me wasn't interpreted as I'm not good enough, she's shaming me, she doesn't like who I've become, all those kind of things.
mhm.
And I've healed that part of our relationship, but it took a while. There was a lot of like setting boundaries and having to keep my own peace by protecting myself and my family from her opinions. It was
Mm.
kind of hard.
That's another topic that's so important for a lot of us who are raised in a strict religious setting. We don't learn how to truly love people, which is also loving ourselves and having a balance with that, being able to set boundaries and love people from a distance and do what we need to take care of ourselves. And that can be such an important part of the process when you're going through a deconstruction and you're just surrounded by so much drama and criticism.
100%. I've come to this place where I have such deep love and compassion for myself that now I can accept other people's opinions of me, and not, it doesn't hurt me anymore.
Mm,
But there were several years there where it was just terrifying. And especially to not have my mom's approval. Like, she loves me and she tries very hard to show that love. And I can finally receive that again without being hurt or feeling condemned by it, if that
mm.
makes sense. So it's a process. It takes time sometimes, and a lot of self-evaluation and self-reflection, and getting to the point where you can heal your own childhood wounds and give yourself that love that you were craving from a parental figure or from somebody else. So
Then that leads me to ask you, do you have any advice for people who are trying to figure out how to do that, who maybe are just feeling so like lost and overwhelmed in all of that negativity? Because I know I was there for a while too after I deconstructed and just feeling myself shutting down because it's just constant criticism everywhere, privately, publicly, everything, and feeling that normal place of love that I would have within myself, just not being able to reach that and
mhm.
feeling resentment towards people and not wanting to feel that way, but not really knowing how to heal. So, do you have any advice on how to go through that process?
Tons. That could be that could be a whole podcast in and of itself. Um, First, I would say self-awareness is the number one first thing you have to know. Like, you have to know that, oh, this triggers me, and then ask yourself, why is it triggering me? What's it mirroring back to me about myself? Because anytime we're triggered by somebody else's truth or by their opinions of us or whatever, it's actually just a reflection of something that we haven't healed within ourselves yet. And so when you can take a trigger and say, how can I turn this around to be my friend, to be my guidance of an inner reflection of like, oh, she's shaming me. She feels like I'm not good enough because I don't feel like I'm good enough, because I feel ashamed from holding back my truth for so long, or from maybe disappointing others, or whatever it might be, right? So self-reflection, awareness, allowing yourself grace to forgive yourself and say, you know what, I did the best I could with the knowledge that I had, and I couldn't do it any other differently because I didn't. You know, I am who I am. And I'm actually teaching a whole program on this right now. I have a program called Free Her that's all about helping women get into their inner child healing and acknowledge what that little person inside of you, who you came with, that wholeness that is already intrinsically part of you. You came here whole. And then we're taught and buried under opinions and labels and programming from every angle. And then that little child inside of us gets buried and believes that they're not good enough, believes that they have to prove themselves or do something more, or change themselves in order to fit in, whatever it might be, and getting to that place where we can just find that person and remember who we really are. That's like my whole mission in life now, is just really helping people tune in to their inner knowing, their inner guidance, not from anywhere else, but from within. And that's something that I'll be offering a lot more, because I'm doing my first round of it right now. And it's so fun for me to help other people recognize their own worth and remember who they are.
Oh,
So
that's
I
so
guess that'll be on
exciting.
my website eventually.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I think this would be a good place to transition into talking about what happened with, I believe it was your youngest, it's your youngest daughter, and what happened with that led into your after death communications with her and the writing of your book.
Yes, so that happened during COVID. Let's say COVID was like this trifecta for me. Everyone was dealing with the whole COVID, all the things, right? The pandemic was awful for everyone. During the pandemic was when I left the church, and actually I left it a little bit before that, before they went to Zoom meetings or whatever. And it's when my daughter died. She was 18 months old in August of 2020, and her whole life, it just feels kind of like a dream at this point. It's been 2.5 years since she passed, but about 2.5 years, or maybe 3 or 4 years even before she was even conceived, I had a dream, like a very strong dream, that woke me up in the middle of the night several times, like the same recurring nightmare, that one of my children was going to drown, that I would blame it on my husband because he always wanted a freaking pool and pond in our property. It was his fault. And we would get divorced, and my entire life would just fall to shambles. I actually write about this in my first book. I don't know if I told you about this book.
No,
Camera's gonna work there. But the 10-minute refresh for moms, less stress, more joy. In this book, I literally have a whole chapter about that dream and how I did something called fear setting, where if I did have a child who were to drown, what would I do? How would I become a victor instead of a victim? How would I use it to help other people? And how would I do it like in such a way that I could save my marriage and not have everything else in my world fall apart? I literally
wow.
wrote that before Emberly was conceived.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And then once she got here, man, it was really hard to live with premonitions, because I didn't know what I thought. They were intrusive thoughts. I thought that I was just afraid her whole life. But in hindsight, I now know that it was just my soul preparing me and letting me know. There would be multiple times I'd be like sitting here playing on my computer or working, doing something, and I would get the nudge, put this down and take a picture of her right now. You're going to want to remember this, or take videos. Make sure you get pictures with every single one of her siblings alone, so they have that. Make sure you do this, like constant through her whole life. And I hated it like so much. I'm grateful for it now. But during that time, I was just like, stop, like, don't tell me she's going to die. And then I remember, for all of my other 5 children, I never would sing them the song "You Are My Sunshine," because I hated how it ended. Like, please don't take my sunshine away. Like, what are these lullabies we sing to our kids?
Right? Thought that too.
Like, rockabye baby on the tree. Like, what? You know. But for some reason, she was my sunshine. We had waited 8 years to get pregnant with her after having our 5th child, and I always wanted 6 kids. So it took us 8 years, 2 miscarriages, and an ectopic pregnancy for her to finally be in our family. So she was very special to me. and she was the one born during my whole deconstruction process, where I was like, I'm going to have a blank slate with this kid to like train them in a way that's just freeing from the box, free from the rules and expectations. And she was the one I was pregnant with at Dr. Joe's retreat and everything. Oh man. And then one day I remember changing her diaper and just looking into her eyes and singing "You Are My Sunshine." And when I got to that line, "Please don't take my sunshine away," like she was just staring at my eyes like, "It's okay, Mom." And I was like, "Not yet. Don't leave yet. I'm not ready." And then she passed away 2 months later by drowning in our backyard. And it's difficult because the whole time I knew it was going to happen, and I didn't want to have it happen. And I fought it, and I tried very hard to prevent it. And unfortunately, we did not have a pool fence, despite the fact that I'd fought with my husband multiple times about it. Um, he wanted to build a pool house and then get plumbing in the yard, and so we couldn't put a fence on top of it yet. And then when I finally convinced him that we needed to, it's time, freaking COVID happens, and there were no workers and
Oh,
no materials, and it was just too late, right? And so there's this guilt inside, and I've actually gone through this whole process a lot too, of like, I knew and I didn't speak my truth again because I was part of this patriarchy where my
right,
husband was above me, right? I couldn't speak against what his gut told him, because heaven forbid mine was more correct or whatever. So
right.
I had to go through that whole process of like, I did the best I could, and it was going to happen no matter what. She's told me that multiple times after she died. So let's get to that point, because it was pretty miraculous. Well, before I tell you about that, I want to tell you the night that she died, I was able to fly with her to Columbus in a helicopter ride. They were able to get her to start breathing enough where they thought that maybe they could you know, get her to survive. And in that helicopter ride, I was alone with her and these two ENT or whatever they're called, emergency technician guys that were like helping her breathe. And I had this moment in the helicopter where I knew I had to let her go, where I just knew it was her time and that this was a soul contract. Like, I just somehow knew deep down that she wasn't going to be here long, and I had to give her that permission. Not that she needed my permission, but she wanted it.
Right.
And I had to say, it's okay. You know, you've done your job and we'll be all right. And it was so hard, but also I just knew that it was the right thing to do. And then soon after we landed, they rushed her in and did all these tests and found that she was brain dead. And I was alone in the hospital laying with her dead body for about 2 hours before my husband and kids got there. And that was very, very beautiful and difficult time. It's just so heart-wrenching and hard to say goodbye. And at the same time, I felt this deep peace, and I felt this weird relief leave my body. The fear that I had lived with her entire life left completely, because here it was. The worst case scenario was here. And it was so weird to feel relief like during those moments, but that's what I felt. And I knew deep down that something amazing was going to happen from this. I already knew from my first book that I was going to choose to make this some kind of miracle. I didn't know how. Fast forward a few weeks after the funeral, I was led to the psychic medium, who then told me, you need to write down everything right now, all your feelings, all your thoughts, all the things you're going through. And you need to hear Emberly's answers to all your questions, because you're a channel and you guys were meant to write a book together. And at that point, I'd never even thought about that ever. Like, wasn't even like in my mind. And I was like, okay. And so I did. And I had never thought of myself as a channel. First of all, I was Mormon. Like, we don't channel. That's woo and that's satanic and whatever. But a couple weeks after that, I started like getting up every morning and meditating and trying to connect with her before my children had to go to school or whatever. And I got up and just started typing in my laptop. And I'm sure you've probably heard of automatic writing or free writing or whatever. And that's kind of the process I used, because I didn't know how to channel. I was like, I don't know, I don't have a clue, but I knew I needed to record it. And it was supposed to become a book. I had no idea why, but so I'd started just asking her questions like, where are you? What's going on? Like, why did you leave? What happened when you left? Like, did anyone greet you? Do you have a message for me? You know, all of these things every day for at least 4 months. I believe we wrote over 200,000 words together in the first 4 months before she died, or right after she died. And it became such a transformative experience for me. And the answers that she gave me were so confirming to where I was as a soul that I was so grateful that it happened. So grateful that she is still in my life and has taught me that there's life after death, that there's no doubt in my mind that she's still here and she's a part of me and always will be. And I know our book is blessing multiple lives. I've already received so many beautiful emails and like I said, it took 4 months to write that. And it took me 2.5 years, well, 2 years after we wrote it to be willing to publish it because I was terrified to say the least. I was so scared, especially because most of my Facebook world at that time and nobody in my life except for my brother had left the church before. So I didn't really have anyone I could just talk to about the deconstruction process. I didn't even know there was a whole deconstruction basically group of community on TikTok. I had no idea that even existed until this past summer. So 2 years on my own of having this knowledge, of having it written down, of feeling amazing about it, but also terrified to share it, terrified to like come out as a channel, like what, to share my new truths. Like all of it was just so scary. And but something really cool happened. I started art. I had never considered myself an artist either. And about right after we'd finished the book, I was led to this like resin art course where I learned how to make geodes and really cool art that looked gorgeous. And I got to play with crystals for fun. And so I started like creating a whole bunch of art and just diving into that. And I found that I could like communicate with her in that way as well. Like she'd be like, it wouldn't it be fun to play with these colors or like, and it was just my way of like getting into flow and not needing to type it out or like think about it. It was just like, just come out of me. And that was a beautiful process. And that kind of led me into like, I can find joy other places than just my laptop. I can live my life and be me and not have to spend my whole day like thinking about my dead daughter, because that's what I want to do. I create a legacy for her. And one day I was out there in the I use my pool house as my studio, and I was listening to YouTube and something populated from Kyle Cease. Do you know Kyle Cease?
Yes, I do.
Like one of my favorite speakers. And he had never talked about this before in anything I listened to, but he started talking about a darkness retreat and how he had gone 10 days in this dark cave all by himself and had a man like deliver food through a double door to like feed him or whatever. And like something in me, my soul was like, you got to do that. That's your next step. Like, that's what you got to do to figure out what to do with the book. Because at that point, I'd been holding on to this book, too terrified to share anything and didn't know what to do with it. And they're like, I think it was Emberly or whatever. Just saying that's your next step, Mom. So I looked it up and it was the coolest thing. I found the one that Kyle Cease must have been talking about because it's the only one I could find in the entire United States. And it was in Ashland, Oregon, which is an hour away from where I grew up. Like literally grew up in Klamath Falls, Oregon. And that was like confirmation again. Oh my goodness, I'm supposed to go there. This is like bringing me back to my inner child, like bringing me back home, where I hadn't been there since we've been married, like almost 20 years. So that was really cool. And I signed up, but they had a waiting list. I had to wait like 4 or 5 months to be able to go. And that experience, I would not suggest anyone go. Definitely say, do not go to the dark room unless you are feeling absolutely called there. Because my soul was like, go, go, go. And I would say most people would say, no, 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 right? But that's where she revealed to me the name of our book. And it was the most fantastic thing I'd ever felt in my life. Like just one of those like moments where I just had full body chills. And first of all, you're in this room all by yourself. There's no light, there's no windows, there's nothing, there's no sound. It was like in the middle of a forest, like probably half a mile away from this guy's house. They lived out off of the grid, so there's no electricity around. It was just like really cool and really totally out there for me, like totally new experience. And it took 5 days, Melissa, 5 days before I had anything spiritual or nice happen. It was actually really terrifying for some parts of it, because I had a horrible dream and weird stuff happen. I was like scared to be there until this happened, and it was just like all my fears just melted away. And I was asking her about the title of my book. And so before that, when I was talking to my editor, I'd already had the book edited for a while. And she's like a very spiritual person, and we've been talking about SEO, or search engine optimization, keywords that people would search to be able to find my book. Like, what are we going to name it so people can find it? And I had no idea. I was like, I have no idea what to name this book. And my editor had said, well, how about Return to All That Is? Because that's what Emberly does. And that's basically what you do in the book. I see you go from this point of grief and despair to this point of light and love and beauty and joy. And I was like, okay, I'll think about that, or Returning to All That Is, so that was the working title in my mind. And after 5 days of just complete boredom and awesomeness and the meditation and sadness and scared, all the feelings, all the emotions come up when you're in a room by yourself with nothing else to do but feel your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I finally got this download that was just amazing. And Emberly told me, I was like, can you just at least help me with the title of the book? Like, should I name it Return to All That Is? And she was like, well, you can't really return to all that is, because you are now, you always have been, and always will be an intricate and necessary part of the wholeness of all that is. It's more of a remembering. She said, name the book Remember All That Is, and highlight the ember, because her name was Emberly. And because, sorry, an ember is a part of a fire that looks like it's separate, that looks like it's dead sometimes and alone. But if you just put a little intention and a little air and focus and give it a little love, it can come back to full life and ignite an even bigger fire. Mm. And that's what happens when we remember who we are, when we remember all that is. And when we come back to our wholeness, that's always a part of us, that has always been there, and that we've just forgotten. And that was a very special moment. And so that's what we named it.
Wow. I was going to ask you to share that story because, like I told you, I was watching your TikTok video where you shared that. And in that video, you also talked about where the phrase all that is came from. Can you share that too?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So for me, all that is represents God, or source, or universe, or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And all that is literally is that, like, every single thing constitutes all that is. And she even tells me in the book a really cool phrase, because I'm talking about negative things that happen, and hardships and pain and fear and anxiety and depression, all these things. And I'm like, I want to get rid of them. I don't want them in my life. And she's like, enjoy the sadness, enjoy the beauty, the suffering and the pain, because pain can actually be more pleasurable than pleasure on a soul level. We really, really want to experience that. And she said, all that is could not be all that is without all that is. That is what wholeness is. That is what remembering who we really are is. It's all encompassing. It's the good, the bad, the ugly, the awesome. Every single thing is part of that. And when we can embrace all of it and love all of it and accept it, it becomes healed within us. And we really can tap into who we really are at the core, which is just love and light and beauty and acceptance and neutrality. There's positive, negative, and neutrality. It's not bad, good, and neutral. It's all necessary. It's just like a battery. Like, we have to have the positive and the negative side in order for it to work. And that's how our souls are as well.
Wow. That's fascinating and hard from this perspective to understand how it is that our souls would want to experience pain. Maybe we can understand how there could be a value in that, but it's hard to understand how it could actually be pleasurable to our souls.
She gave me a couple different analogies that I'll share because they have made a huge difference in my life. And I was reminded of one just 2 days ago. We went to Kings Island in Ohio. My daughter had a performance for choir and whatever at this amusement park. And waiting in line for like over an hour for one ride, is not exactly the most pleasant experience. You get kind of bored, you get tired, you get hungry, you get hot or cold. It was actually kind of cold in the line. But every time I've gone to Disneyland in the past, it's been like a beautiful, magical experience and kind of dreadful. Like you have to wait in line for 3 hours for some of the rides, right? And Emberly told me that coming to Earth is like the Disneyland of the universe for our souls. We really look
Wow.
forward to it. Like we get really excited to go. And then when we're there here on Earth, we're like, oh, this is forever. I have to wait here forever. And it's awful and it's suffering. I'm just like so bored. Or, we're just like, we're suffering and we're sad and we're feeling all the emotions that we would feel like in the line before a great ride, right?
Mhm.
And then even on the rides, we have really high highs and really low lows
Right.
and all of the things in between. And that's what our soul craves. In order to expand, we have to go and experience something that will bring us to bigger extremes than what we've already experienced. So
Oh,
we
wow.
want the high highs and we want the low lows in order to expand on a soul consciousness and to recognize more of who we really are and become more. And then another analogy she gave me that made a lot of sense is how we wait in line and tons of people go and pay to go to haunted houses.
Yes.
People love being scared. They go to horror shows, right? Horror movies. The horrible things are happening, and yet they're entertained by it. They find delight in being scared and screaming or not knowing what's going to happen next. Right? And you get like all scared. And that's on a soul level. Like our souls love to be entertained by being afraid, and they can't feel fear when they're connected wholly to all that is and remembering who they are. We come here to forget that so we can experience amusement and fear and joy in the unknown. And as humans, we forget that. Our consciousness becomes wrapped up in the I'm so afraid. But then when you feel your fear and are able to release it and feel that relief, it's an immense pleasure that our souls couldn't feel without having felt the fear first.
Wow. Oh, that makes so much sense. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it was one of those beautiful lessons because I was complaining a lot to her. I have a lot of chronic pain. I know you've talked about that in some of your videos as well. And I just kept complaining about my physical pain. And I had a really cool experience a few months ago. My husband and I were able to go and try MDMA, which is basically like a kind of like a plant medicine, but they're using it to cure a lot of people with PTSD and people that have experienced major trauma, which we obviously did. And one of the coolest things that happened in that, one of the first things that happened actually was like, I was not able to move my whole body. I felt paralyzed, which was really weird for me. I couldn't move a muscle, like my hands and everything were just like in one place. And my soul was like, don't worry, you don't need your body right now. And then it showed me a vision. And I haven't really shared this experience with hardly anyone, so I'm excited to tell you. But it basically showed me almost as a soul looking at a computer or like an iPad kind of thing and scrolling through different avatars that I could choose in this lifetime, what body I wanted to choose, as if it was like looking in a closet of like what outfit I wanted to choose for this play or what costume I wanted to wear. And I chose this specific one because it was more susceptible to pain, because it felt things on a deeper level than a lot of other avatars, right? And I specifically chose this body because it was sensitive, because I could feel things more in it. And I remember in that moment just loving my body so much and being so grateful instead of so angry, instead of
Uh-huh.
grateful toward it, instead of feeling like I'm a victim to my body and like I just want to get out of it. I felt just such deep love and compassion and joy that I chose this body so that I could feel even more pain than most people because it's super sensitive to
Wow.
all the things. And we talk about it a ton in the book, chronic pain and how I actually want to read you a section if that's okay.
Yes, please.
I
I would
asked
love
her,
that.
I asked her before the interview what she wanted me to share, and this is just coming up. So
Okay.
let's see if I can find where I want to start. Um, so I'm asking her basically like, I feel terrible, I hate my body, and I want to love it, and I'm trying all the different foods and tuning into my body, and is there anything else? And she said, love your body, give it praise, find the things you really appreciate about it, and tell yourselves daily how much you love them and thank them for all the things they do well. Don't focus on the things they don't do well. Focus on what is going well and how being super healthy will feel. Remember, you always get what you focus on. And while it can be hard to not to focus on the pain, you are getting more pain because of your inability to focus on your health. And I said, goodness, I'm terrible about that. She said, most people are. Don't feel bad about it. That just puts you in a terrible loop. You feel bad about a situation, then you beat yourself up for feeling bad. So you go and do something that makes you feel worse. It's a sad cycle that unfortunately many people follow daily. I said, yeah, I've been doing it for years. How can I stop? The key to stopping anything is awareness. Pay attention to each and every thought you have. You already know this, but again, you often don't do it, especially when it comes to your chronic pain. I said, yep, I'm totally guilty of that. Goodness, I have a lot to improve. No, actually, you don't have to improve anything. That's the biggest problem that most people fall for in life, that you need to fix things to make them better. What would happen if you just accepted it and didn't take any steps to try to make it better? And I was like,
Huh.
You mean if I ignored the pain and acted like it wasn't there? No. Ignoring and accepting are two completely different things. When things or people get ignored, it makes them worse, not better. But when they are lovingly held and adored and treated like they belong, they heal. How on earth am I supposed to lovingly adore my pain? I'm like, trust me, I've tried hard to come to grips with it, but it just isn't happening. And she said, do you hear the words you just used? Coming to grips with it doesn't mean accepting and loving it. It means tolerating it at best. Think of your pain as a child who's been ignored, neglected, or told to go away. How would you feel if you were that child? How would you treat that child if they came to your home? When you can treat your pain from the point of view that recognizes its worth and doesn't judge it as wrong or bad, you will be moving in the direction of healing.
Wow.
What? Yeah.
That's so deep and makes such sense because this is a theme that keeps coming up for me over and over, is that the concept of loving awareness and how that is the goal of everything. One of my favorite spiritual teachers, Aaron Abke, I don't know if you're aware of him, but he has been talking about this recently, about how enlightenment is simply loving awareness, loving relationship with everything, and that includes your thoughts, your feelings, the things you don't like about yourself, everything.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Loving awareness is exactly what remembering all that is. Bring who you are, and who you are is all that is. And when you can love yourself so unconditionally to the point where you don't judge yourself or label it as bad or think that your feelings are invalid or, try to push them under a rug, you can then love everyone else right where they are. You don't have to change them or fix them or coerce them to believe the way that you believe anymore. You can just see them as love and light and accept them. I love that. Loving awareness. That's good.
Mm. So if you're having a problem with accepting someone else, that means look at yourself, look at myself and see what I'm not accepting in myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten to this point where I'm like super excited when I get triggered. Like maybe not right away. Like I'm still triggered, right? I
That
still
is
feel the
such a
emotions
good
like
way to look at it.
I still feel initially triggered of those same emotions, but then when I feel them, I'm like, okay, awesome. What can this teach me about me? And then
Yes.
when I do that, it totally transmutes the trigger and makes it something that's like not even a thing anymore. Yeah,
Mm.
it's a super fun way to live. It might sound like totally counterintuitive because most of us are living on a consciousness level where we have every right to be triggered. They're to blame for the way that we feel. But
Right.
when you can take radical responsibility for the way that you react and the way you feel and process, you recognize that everything is just a perspective. And that's another thing that was really cool from my MDMA experiments or experience. I was terrified of people's opinions of my book. I had received several one-star reviews and one really terrible, like over 5,000 word email
Oh
ripping
no.
every single thing apart. And because that's what I expected. That was my belief that people are just going to rip it
Mm.
apart. They're not going to love it like I do. And I had to have that happen in order to heal it. But I went into this MDMA session asking for healing of the trauma of being rejected, of caring so much about other people's opinions about me that I didn't care about my own. I'd learned that over and over in the book. Emily had taught me, and yet I was having a really difficult time embodying it. And this image of a disco ball came into my mind. And it was so fascinating because a disco ball could represent the wholeness of all that is. It's one piece made of thousands of little mirrors that are all just mirroring each other back to each other. And from one perspective, you can look at the disco ball and say, look how bright that side is shining. It's just so beautiful and reflective. Whereas the bottom of it could look really dark and in the shadow. But if I'm on the other side of the disco ball, it would be the opposite. And that particular darkness would be bright and beautiful. And the other part would look dark. And each of us are on our own little part of this disco ball. We each represent one of the little mirrors. And whether we're shining or not, we're still part of the wholeness of all that is. We're still a very necessary part. Take one of those mirrors off and the whole disco ball is broken, right? It doesn't work anymore. And yet I can be on this side of the disco ball shining my brightest, and somebody over here would never, they'll never see it. And that's okay because my light's not for them. My light's just for these people that have access to me or that see me. And if they're here saying that my it's too bright, turn it off. That's annoying, whatever, criticize what I have to share, that has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with where they're seeing the world from their point of view on the disco ball. And if we can just love everyone where they're at, no matter where they fall on that little ball or big ball, then you can come to a greater awareness of loving everyone and recognizing that their opinion's valid, and so is mine. And I can keep shining so long as I feel good about it.
I could talk to you for so much longer, but I want to thank you for sharing. First of all, my heart goes out to you as a mother in the loss of your child. And I can't even wrap my mind around what you've been through and how hard it probably is to talk about it. So I want to thank you for being willing to put yourself out there, because there's so many people who can be comforted through what you've experienced. And just the simple fact of knowing that there is life on the other side and that you have received those communications and the messages that are coming through you now are so healing. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being willing to come on my show and talk about it. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to share where the viewers can find you in your book and your classes and anything else that you're doing.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved talking with you. I'd love to come back. My website is probably the best place to find me. It's www.embersglowstudio.com. Once again, using Emberly's name because this is her legacy too. So
That's
I'm
beautiful.
sharing it as much as I can. And on there, you can find all our art, and then you can go to the courses and books tab, and it'll give you the links to those. And I'll have programs in the future to help other people really heal their inner child and really get to this place of just feeling whole and complete now and not having to wait for heaven or someday to get there.
And I'll have all those links in the description, so feel free to check those out. Thank you again, Nicole. Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, share this video with your friends, and comment with your thoughts and opinions. And check the description box for the links to my TikTok and Instagram, where I share the more personal side of my life, my website, where I share my paintings and merch, and also the Be a Guest link for anybody who's interested in sharing their story. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.